It's currently the early 20th century. Many countries are rising to power, like in the Americas, Europe, and Asia. It looks like the economy seems to be alright. Well, I'm sure everything else is fine. Oh.
So, wait, let's back up a bit. The mid-19th century, countries began to imperialize, strengthening their influence towards smaller, weaker countries, taking their raw materials whilst claiming their land to strengthen their own nation with more men. And it sort of went like this. Alright, so that's 1, 2, and 3 rubber trees established. Hey Africa, how you doing? That's cool. Oh, so do you like God? And can we take raw materials from you in order to establish a colony? And when you think that we will reach you, we really won't for another 50 or so years? Yeah, but... Great, that's amazing. Boys, get them. Now, all jokes aside, the colonies were taken over by a landslide, and many of the native/indigenous people were left to rebel against the stronger, influential European colonists. Now, over time, disputes over land and who rules ultimately led towards countries fighting each other, increasing their military, creating alliances, stronger imperialism, and nationalism, also known as Maine, which you can say happens all so fast that you could say this took a wrong turn. This took a wrong turn. And during this time, the US has grown into a superpower. It began making purchases of land, such as the Louisiana Purchase, and expand towards the Pacific Ocean, known as Manifest Destiny. They also began to follow in the footsteps of major countries like Britain, in which they also industrialized and imperialized other areas from their sphere of influence. And though I'm talking about the US, many other countries like Japan and Germany have also followed this pattern towards the 20th century, leading to either demise, success, or a revolution.
So, our thesis is, during the 20th century, 3 historical themes were established. Economically, China and the United States' experiences from the Depression differed from how the US main causes and experiences were felt internally, while China was external. Politically, the ideas of totalitarianism and communism were most similar in parts of Asia, like Japan, and Europe, like Nazi Germany. And finally, socially, Europe and Asia, which once again can be seen from Nazi Germany and Japan, had a staggering effect on total war, to which they made sure they were superior towards people they thought that were inferior.
During this time, the Great Depression, most caused by the October stock crash of 1929, was felt in many areas of the world. The US and China, for example, were both affected by the Depression, but were experienced a bit differently. The US was affected internally with conflicts in banks, the rise of agricultural goods, and subjectively bad leadership from the president. That's not to say that China did not experience this, but rather that China's effect from the Depression increased furthermore from external Japanese infiltration towards Manchuria, which weakened the nation. The US's main problems drive from within itself. Huge loans left banks weak from those who became bankrupt. But maybe this guy Calvin Coolidge can help us. Calvin Coolidge failed to support depressed agriculture and did not help due to the belief of less power in government. And anyways, China on the other hand faced partially the same thing. They began to import lots of Western goods, which were inflated at high prices, and began to export less goods for even more inflated prices. But the huge deal was when Japan began to take over Korea. They saw China and decided to take over Manchuria while they could. This worked well for them, but hugely impacted the people in it, and its economy. Jobs already paid less, therefore no one worked, and due to Japan's invasion, they killed loads of people, furthermore decreasing the amount of people that worked. So both countries did get affected by the Great Depression. It's just that America faced internal struggles, while China on the other hand faced external problems.
Around this time period, many forms of beliefs, especially government-related, were created and brought to life. One of these ideas is totalitarianism. Now, you may be asking, what does that mean? To put it simply, it's the ideology of absolute power and full control. We can see this represented in Asia by the Japanese Empire. The Japanese liked this idea of having so much power and control after wars like the Sino-Japanese War between China and Japan. So, in 1910, Korea was officially annexed by the Empire of Japan. What was Japan's goal? To obliterate the Korean country as a whole. Throughout their invasion, around 720,000 Koreans were forced to work in Japan. One of the worst things they did was having Koreans worship the gods of Imperial Japan like dead emperors, which many people viewed as an act of cultural genocide. Aside from Asia, Europe dealt with a similar ideology used. What was that, you may ask?
Here we go again.
Communism. Communism is similar to totalitarianism, but they are not the same. Both ideologies share a similar idea of government control, but communism involves government by the people, making all property publicly owned and job wages according to other people's needs or abilities. Basically, everyone got paid the same no matter what. Russia's leader, Joseph Stalin, had spread this ideology throughout his country, and after World War II, he was paranoid. He became obsessed with an invasion from the West, so he set up communist governments all across Europe. His spread of communism would lead to the creation of NATO. NATO was founded by 12 countries, which were Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, the United Kingdom, and the United States.
During the 20th century, both Europe and Asia were similar socially. Their ideas of total war in Europe and Asia both had similarities, in that the Nazi Party in Europe had a profound hatred to the Jews, as they thought that they were inferior against the Nazis, which caused the Holocaust, and how the Chinese and Korean people were inferior towards the Japanese because of imperialism and protection from the Russian expansion. Total wars also caused mass destruction towards their enemies, quote-unquote. Many prison camps and military bases immediately established to show power and authority. Another similarity arose, but this time with Russia and China. Russia and China both began to revolutionize for a unified country and to remove corruption. In both China and Russia, groups of revolutionaries started with their leaders, Mao Zedong in China and Vladimir Lenin in Russia, both of whom also used Marxist ideas. In retrospect, Europe and Asia were very similar socially during this time, as they were both subject to change, especially from recent events, as a whole new era of wars and tensions arose.
So, basically, all these events have led to where we are now. To sum this video up, what we've learned here was that lots of areas during the 20th century, including Asia, Europe, and the Americas, went through various changes. We saw how the Americas and China differed between internal and external conflicts because of the Great Depression. We saw the rise of totalitarianism and communism expressed similarly throughout Japan and Nazi Germany. And finally, we talked about how the social changes that Asia and Europe went through with, again, Nazi Germany and Japan, expressing the idea of total war by establishing itself as superior towards certain groups. That's all today, and thanks for watching.